Je voudrais être une mémé un jour à la campagne avec mes fruits, mes arbres et ma fille et vivre.
Six weeks after her last interview, Romy Schneider is preparing to spend a weekend at home in Paris, Rue Barbet de Jouy. A long weekend, as it is Pentecost.
J'ai eu le vendredi soir avec elle
I had a long telephone conversation with her on the Friday evening, and she was fine. We talked about the film project, which was coming along.
C'était en train d'avancer. Le soir à 20 heures, Gérard.
That evening at 8 o'clock, Gerard, how are you? She was adorable, and we talked for a good hour. At that moment, as we were talking, she was happy.
And yet, the next morning, the star is found dead.
Romy Schneider est morte ce matin à Paris. Il s'agit d'un suicide ou d'un accident dû au barbiturique. L'autopsie décidée par les enquêteurs permettra de le préciser.
At the time of her death, Romy Schneider's last film, La Passante du Sans Souci, is still on release. She is only 43 and she is France's favorite actress. Starting with La Piscine, follow a string of successful movies, from Le Vieux Fusil to L'Important c'est d'aimer, including Max et les Ferrailleurs and Les Choses de la Vie.
She was a great actress. She could do everything, from comedies to drama, and she was always very good.
What was magical about Romy Schneider was her ability to invest the character she played with such deep and real and true humanity, and at the same time to be so luminous and radiant and photogenic.
What she had, in addition to her talent, was her extraordinary beauty.
She was more than a beauty. She was so original and unique. You couldn't find anyone else like her. That's what happens with such charming people. And she was charming.
Romy Schneider projected the image of a triumphant star with a career crowned by 2 César Awards in just 5 years. But her personal life was a series of painful disappointments.
Romy was someone I felt to be in pain. I felt her fragility. Always at breaking point.
For a number of years, Romy had found a certain balance with her children. Sarah, the most recent, and David, already a young man.
He was quite a reserved little boy and quite serious.
There was a very special relationship between mother and son. David was the love of her life, the love of her life.
But it is 10 months before her death that her world falls apart.
I think it was a Sunday, but she got the telephone call that her son, David, was bleeding to death on the fence and laying in the hospital.
Romy Schneider rushes to the Saint-Germain-en-Laye hospital. Her son is in the operating room. David had been spending the weekend with his grandparents. In trying to climb the entrance gate, he fell and was impaled.
The intervention, unfortunately, did not last very long, as we were soon faced with a very grave situation. There was nothing we could do.
Romy Schneider is told that her son is dead.
There was no screaming or hysterics. There was no physical collapse. There was just the impression that it wasn't her who was falling apart, but the whole world around her.
She was utterly destroyed, not only by his death, but by the way he died.
That was the real end of Romy Schneider. She died half a year later, really. But I think that was the moment she died.
Romy Schneider's suffering does not end there. Through deceit and trickery, a paparazzi does the unthinkable and takes photos of David at the morgue. The pictures are refused by every French publication, but are published in Germany by the daily paper Das Bild.
Si on sait, vous savez, ce que certaines soi-disant photographes sont capables de faire, je pense que le public a le droit de le savoir. Qu'on se déguise en infirmier pour photographier un enfant mort, qu'il y a une certaine presse qui achète et qui publie à la une, comme on dit.
Her dead son in the hospital, they sold the photos from the dead son 2 days later. 2 days later.
Où est la morale? Où est le tact?
The photographers are relentless. Pursued day and night, Romy Schneider is forced to flee from one hotel to the next.
When she was leaving a house, at the door, the Red Pack, not journalist, Red Pack, was waiting for her to do photos, to shoot. Oh, wow, she's looking, look, is she sad? Is she crying? Is she looking old? Something like that. She was chased to death by my profession, in one way. Chased to death by my profession, like any animal in the forest.
Surtout, qu'on me laisse enfin tranquille.
At the time of her son's death, Romy Schneider is preparing her next film, a film particularly important to her, as it is the first time she is at the root of a project.
Romy came to me saying, "There's a novel by Kessel I like very much. Do you want us to make a film together?" So she was the one who proposed Le Passant de Sans Souci.
And she also suggests the name of Jacques Rouffio as director.
I got a telephone call at a reasonable hour of the day, 11 midnight. "Do you know the Passant de Sans Souci?" "No. You know Kessel?" I said, "Yes." "How can you know Kessel and not know the Passant de Sans Souci?" I said, "I didn't know it." She'd just read the book. I said, "I'll read it and I'll let you know." And that was it. "Okay, read it. Call me back right away," she said.
What she particularly liked about the book was that it attacked the Nazis. She really didn't like Nazis. They were always an obsession with her.
An obsession due to her origins. Romy Schneider was born in Austria in 1938, the year Austria was annexed by Hitler's Germany.
Romy didn't like to be called German. Some people even said Bosch. She hated that. She wanted people to know she was Austrian.
In the early 80s, Paris was victim to a number of bloody anti-Semitic attacks, including one against the synagogue on Rue Copernic. Appalled by this resurgence of hatred for the Jews, Romy feels the need to take action, and this film provides just such an opportunity.
Nous sommes bien conscients qu'il y aura des gens qui ne vont pas aimer du tout, mais est-ce que c'est tellement important? Je n'ai pas peur, non.
Schneider has in her person and her performing all the good sides of Germany too. That means to be liberal, to be open-minded, to care for somebody, and that was all in Passant Souci.
With the death of her son, however, there is one burning question. Will Romy Schneider continue with the project despite the pain and grief of losing a child? No doubt she would prefer to postpone the shooting by a few months, but this is impossible. Her back is up against the wall. The film has already been delayed twice, and both times because of her. The first incident occurs several months before in Brittany, where the star had gone for seawater treatment before shooting began. She received a visit from the German magazine Stern, the photographer Robert Lebec, and the journalist Michael Jürgs.
It was beginning, I think, 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. I was nearly dead, I tell you, because of the champagne, and smoking, of course. But she was like that and was drinking Chablis in the morning, you know.
She was very unstable. She was constantly having mood swings. I think at that time of her life, she was very, very unhappy.
Romy was not happy. She had suffered some particularly harrowing experiences. Her first husband, Harry Meyen, David's father, had killed himself a few months previously. He had hanged himself in his Hamburg home. And she was also in the midst of divorce procedures, Daniel Biasini, after 6 years of marriage.
She had the feeling to be 41 and who wants to do a film with me? It was crazy, but she always was thinking, I'm too old, I'm too old, I'm too old.
Suffering from depression, Romy would even say in the interview, "At the moment, I can barely live with myself."
The next morning, we went to the cliffs between the spa and the sea. There's no beach at this point, but some beautiful cliffs. And she wanted to do me a favor. She was jumping from rock to rock like a young deer. She knew what photographers wanted. You didn't need to ask her. I knew why she was jumping between the rocks like that. It was really, really nice.
Es war alles sehr schön.
A few minutes later, she ended up lying on a rock, and her face was twisted in pain. I said to myself, she's acting. She's only twisted her ankle.
But Romy Schneider's pain was all too real. A doctor diagnoses a fracture.
The fall had huge consequences. Her next film, Le Passant de Sans Souci, was delayed for 4 weeks, and the insurance company had to pay up. It was an expensive business.
As Romy recovers, the pre-production continues. Sets are built, costumes prepared, and contracts are signed. But fate intervenes yet again. Romy Schneider's health is again the cause. This time, she has to have a kidney removed.
Another problem. Another delay. So my co-producer was considering changing the actress.
Arthur Brauner, the German co-producer, was scheming behind the scenes. He plans to take advantage of the situation and replace Romy Schneider with the new muse of German cinema, Hanna Schygulla. Romy's agent visits her in hospital to warn her.
She's in bed, and she says to me, let's talk about the film. So I say, Romy, we'll talk about it later. And she says, no. So I say, okay, I'm not going to lie to you. They want Hanna Schygulla. And she gets up and says, I'm playing this part. Nobody else is going to play it. Not Hanna Schygulla. I'm playing the part. It's my role.
Romy Schneider goes all out to convince the producer and director.
She made me promise that I would not make the film with anyone else.
I wasn't going to change Romy, because she was the one who offered me the film. I wasn't going to betray her and give it to someone else. It was obvious. It was a perfectly normal emotional reaction. And then there was her problem, which only increased the need for delicacy, if you like.
Not only will Raymond Danon and Jacques Rouffio not abandon Romy Schneider, but they are prepared to take every risk. For after the broken ankle, the kidney operation, and the death of David, they are now faced with another problem.
There came a time when the insurance companies refused purely and simply to insure Romy Schneider, saying it's too big a risk.
Danon calls me and we arrange to meet at Fouquet's, him with his cigar, me with nothing. And he says, okay, Jack, listen, I brought you here because I have a choice. Either I don't make the film and I make a lot of money because I have a maximum insurance. We can wait and maybe make it later, but I'm rich and there's no risk for me. Or I make the film and I lose everything. I'll assume all the risks, they won't insure me, and if it's a failure, I'm screwed for life.
It's true that I was wondering, with everything that she's undergone, will she be up to filming? But she wanted to film.
Finally, he says, when can you be ready? I said, if the sets aren't demolished in Berlin, November. It was late August. We shook hands. I was stunned.
And so it is in Berlin that La Passante du Sans Souci is to be made, a clause in the co-production deal that the actress is far from happy with. For Romy, a woman between two cultures, Berlin is not a city like any other.
Berlin me représente une honte pour tout le monde, une honte qu'on traîne depuis 30 ans. Imaginez Paris ou toute autre ville coupée en deux. Et puis Berlin, c'est aussi une ville qui est pleine de souvenirs personnels pour moi.
I think Romy never particularly liked Berlin, no more than she particularly liked Germany.
To understand Romy Schneider's love-hate relationship with Germany, we need to recall her childhood and her mother, Magda. Behind their apparent complicity lay a tangled relationship of misunderstandings.
Her mother was one of the big stars in the Nazi time, and that was everything she discussed.
Magda had been the heroine of numerous romantic comedies in the 30s and 40s. But at the end of the war, her career was at a dead end. To relaunch it, she thought nothing of using her own daughter, pushing her onto film sets and in front of the cameras.
Magda, she has done everything to have success beside of her daughter. Nobody wants to give Magda Schneider any film role anymore, but with Romy, she got some roles too. She could perform in any films.
Her mother was an iron lady who ruled her own life and that of her daughter. It was her mother who pushed her, and I think she got a taste for it. She believed it was her natural element, that she loved the camera and the camera loved her, that it was her life.
Mother and daughter would make 8 films together, including the Sissi series, which would make Romy a star.
Sissi was the chance of a lifetime and perhaps also a curse. In just 3 films, she became the world's sweetheart. She was famous all over the world. She was beautiful, the stories were real fairy stories that appealed to the dreams of both young girls and their grandmothers. It was slushy, but there was also something magical about it too.
The German loved her. She was absolutely magnificent. Everyone would have liked to have a daughter like her. She was so pretty, the ideal daughter.
Despite the success, Romy would refuse to make the 4th Sissi film.
When she played the Sissi roles at the beginning, she was really playing parts that were not her at all. She was someone who really wanted to look for something else.
The desire for something new would lead to a radical change. She came to France to make Christine and met Alain Delon.
She turned her back on everyone and went to France. The Germans took it very badly, and they always reproached her for it. They liked her as Sissi, and they thought it was shocking that she went off with Alain Delon. But ultimately, he made something of her.
It was a country, after the war, still Nazi country. She was like a traitor going to France, because France was the enemy, of course. And after she was in love with Alain Delon, everybody was writing here, she's a putain. Romy Schneider said une putain. And it was all the time in her whole life that all the wonderful films she did in France were not seen in Germany at all.
In France, on the other hand, the romance between the German star and the handsome young leading man was very exciting.
They were young, talented, successful, cinema's fiancés. They were the prince and princess of cinema at the time.
In Paris, Romy takes to the stage and works with Delon under the direction of Luchino Visconti, a whole other world.
The fact of knowing Alain very young and of moving from Austrian society to French society with a very strong cultural influence, it was like an extraordinary revelation for this young woman. And so it changed her profoundly. It had a profound effect on her.
After 4 years of passion, Delon leaves Romy Schneider. She returns to Germany and marries Harry Meyen, with whom she has a son, David. Her career declines, but Alain Delon does not forget her.
And she was trying to live as a normal woman in Berlin with her son and everything, but when the telephone rings at some time and somebody was calling, said Delon, Alain Delon, let's do a film. She was in France again. The great love of her life was Alain Delon. Nobody else. That was la grande amour, till the end.
Vous êtes heureuse de retrouver Alain Delon?
Très.
Très. Alain Delon, tout à l'heure, vous m'avez dit que vous étiez ému, vous aussi,
oui,
en rencontrant...
C'est normal, vous ne trouvez pas?
Oui, bien sûr.
Vous êtes vous-même ému en tenant ce micro.
Peut-être.
They meet up again, this time to make La Piscine.
Y a encore une?
Non, vas-y, couche-toi, ça tourne en ce moment.
They were like two ex-lovers. You could feel the tension between ex-lovers, but you could also feel that because of his love for her and his respect for her beauty and her personality, that he brought her back from Germany.
Tu es libre, tu sais, entièrement libre.
Pourquoi tu me dis ça?
Tu le sais très bien.
Released in January 1969, La Piscine brings new life to Romy's career. And on top of that, she becomes a French movie star.
After La Piscine, she blossomed, like a flower exploding, a rose opening up. It was so magnificent and uplifting to see. The originality of this person, with her German accent, and the way she walked, like a soldier, a little stiffly. You really felt for her. She could make people cry. People were moved by her.
And so, it is as a French film star that Romy Schneider returns to Germany to make La Passante du Sans Souci. In fact, barely 3 months after her son's death, it is not just a star, but a mother in mourning who moves into the Hotel Steigenberger in Berlin.
Her room was quite bewildering. She had all these little lights and candles and photos of David everywhere. Her room was like a mausoleum. That's the word for it.
During the 2 months filming, there were very few happy moments.
On Friday evenings, her daughter Sarah arrived, who was 4 at the time. And each time, Romy was radiant. She was smiling. She was happy and could smile again, but only at those moments. The rest of the week, you felt that she was broken by grief and despair.
Fortunately, during the week, she is surrounded by her film family. Jean-Max Guérin, her hairdresser for 20 years. Michel Piccoli, her partner and friend since Les Choses de la Vie. Jacques Rouffio, the director. Raymond Danon, the producer. And Ingrid Zoré, her dresser.
We wondered what to do to show her we were there for her, to support her. And we came up with this idea that everyone from the team would offer her a white rose. Big roses, long like that. There were 60 roses in a bouquet this big. And we put it in a dressing room in the studio with a little card that said, "Welcome, signed the crew." And she was so surprised and moved that she burst in tears immediately.
Romy would count on the crew's support throughout the shooting.
She had no mirror for makeup. She wouldn't look at herself in the mirror. When she arrived in the morning with her washed-out face, she'd say to Penzer, the cameraman, Jean, Achtung, Achtung. Was relying enormously on people to help her. It was obvious.
From Jacques Rouffio to the most lowly technician, everyone wanted to protect her, to help her, and be kind to her.
For Romy, the shoot was all the more difficult because the role entailed her confronting a ghost. She was playing a woman fleeing Nazi Germany while looking after a 14-year-old boy. How could she not see her own son, David?
I was thinking, we're up against it here. How will she handle it?
I said to her, it might be dangerous for you to play this part in view of what the role entails. She said, it would be more dangerous for me not to do it.
Up until the last minute, I thought she would pull out. But she was brave.
Romy Schneider is determined to see it through, no matter what.
And when she arrived on set, she arrived not like a boxer, exactly, but determined, as if to say, let's go.
What was extraordinary was that when she was in front of the camera, she tried to take control, and often did, almost always. But she was often tired and sad.
The image I still have is of that extreme force, something very strong and very fragile, a complete paradox, an extreme violence, and the softness, opposites at the same time.
But there are times when things become unbearable.
Everything to do with the child, which was a big part of the film, was just awful for her. It was really hard.
She was acting with the young boy, same age as David.
On some days, towards the end of the day, it was impossible to continue the scenes, to continue filming.
I remember the scene when she's at the table with the child playing the violin. It was very moving to watch. I have goosebumps just talking about it. I think we waited a quite long time for her that day. She arrived with a kind of veil or a mask, as if she was putting a certain distance between her and the scene.
He was younger than David, and from the beginning on we felt that she was distancing herself from him, trying to be detached.
C'est mon fils qui va jouer. Max, je voudrais que tu joues. Que tu joues pour moi.
He began playing and she just fell apart completely. Tears were rolling down her face and she couldn't hold them back. She really fell apart.
There were 100 technicians there, and not a single one of them was not crying. It was awful.
It's as if reality was taking over from cinema at that point, and it's almost disturbing in a way.
The film was fated. Can't explain it, and you can't justify it. How did it happen to be that the boy had exactly the same profile as her son? It was just chance. Why did Kessel put in a boy of the same age? Why was one dead and the other still alive?
How did Romy Schneider find the strength to go through with this impossible film shoot? In her final interview, the actress admitted that she had thought about giving up.
J'ai pensé à ça, mais je ne le ferai pas. Je l'aime mon métier, il m'aide.
Romy was an actress who lived through cinema. Her life, above all, was cinema. She couldn't accept not working.
I'm convinced that if she hadn't made this film, then perhaps she would have gone sooner. I'll go that far. I think it not only helped her, but it helped her survive.
Shortly before the film was released, Romy Schneider asked the director to preface the film with a dedication to David and his father. I have buried the father, I have buried the son. I have never left either one, and they never left me. she wrote in her diary. In fact, La Passante du Sans Souci was a kind of exorcism for Romy Schneider, a way to move on, even if it meant suffering.
She was extremely sensitive. That's why she was such a great tragedy performer and such a great actress.
She was a woman who struggled continually with what she was doing. She would have liked to reshoot certain scenes. She was never happy with herself.
She was afraid to disappoint with regard to the image people had of her.
A fear that could sometimes paralyze.
There was one film where she didn't show up to work one day. I called her, and there was no answer. So I left a message. She called me back, and she said, "You're not going to be happy, and you can be mad at me. You're right, you're all right. I didn't go to the set because last night I watched the rushes and I found myself so ugly that I really didn't feel like being filmed today."
Producer Ariel Zeytun was also confronted with Romy Schneider's fears.
She didn't come during the first 2 days. She arrived after 3 days, not relaxed. She was never relaxed, very nervous, but a fighter. And I think she no doubt needed to be burdened with that necessity to go, to know that her back was up against the wall, that if she didn't go, the film would be stopped. She needed that as if it were a kind of elastic, a trampoline to bounce back off.
Reassured by the success of La Passante du Sans Souci, Romy Schneider accepts a new project, something rather special, as she is to work once more with Alain Delon.
Making L'un contre l'autre with Alain was huge. It was the reformation of a wonderful couple. There's always something mythical about couples who act together. It's as if the mystery, the charm, and the emotion that actors give off is somehow multiplied by 2, or even more so, because they're together. It's like a game of mirrors, which just keeps on reflecting more and more.
L'un contre l'autre nurtures great expectations, particularly as Simone Signoret is due to play Romy Schneider's mother. But alas, the project is pushed back 1 week and then another.
She told me that Alain Delon had changed quite a lot of things and that he wanted to rewrite the script, and so for the moment, the film was not being made.
It was the only project that I had really for Romy after La Passante. There weren't any others.
It wasn't easy, because I think she didn't want to be identified for the rest of her life, you know, as that character from La Passante de Sans Souci.
Sur ce personnage de La Passante du Sans Souci.
I think her work brought her a good deal of comfort. It's a craft where you're constantly surrounded with people who take care of you. Film shots are warm and friendly. It's life in between that's difficult.
Unable to work, Romy Schneider concentrates on her private life. Her daughter Sarah is about to turn 4. And she has a new man in her life, Laurent Pétain, a young assistant she met while filming Fantôme d'amour in Italy with Dino Risi. Ariel Zeytun ran into the actress around that time.
By chance, I was leaving Rome, and I bumped into her at the airport. She was radiant. She was really radiant, and I felt something different from the woman I'd always met when she was tense and worried. This time, she was in fine form. And at one point, she says, "I'm in love." And it's true. You could feel her happiness.
Robert Lebec would be the only photographer to do a session with the couple.
She was really in a good mood. She was really in love with Laurent Pétain, and he was really in love with her. There was a very beautiful scene I photographed where they were having breakfast together in the garden. They were embracing each other all the time, exchanging kisses. She was kissing his hands. It was really beautiful, really peaceful. Just what you could wish for them. I had the impression she was just fine. I had the impression that she was getting better.
In the spring of 1982, the couple decide to buy a house in the country at Boissy-sans-Avoir, about 60 kilometers from Paris, in the middle of wheat fields. For Romy, it was a way of getting away.
She wanted to live in the countryside to find peace. And that very moment when she bought it, this house is for the rest of my life. It was for the rest of her life, but she never got into the house.
But she would never move into the new house, as there was work to be done. In the meantime, she lives Rue Barbet de Jouy in Paris, in a flat lent by a producer friend. Despite the love of her new companion, she again sinks into the depression that has been plaguing her for months.
She was trying to smile and trying to be normal and trying and so on, but she would have needed then a psychotherapist to be in the hospital for weeks and weeks. And what was Laurent Pétain was trying to fulfill the role of a psychotherapist for her.
Laurent Pétain does everything he can to help her, but it is not enough. Romy's old demons resurface.
She knew, of course, that she's got alcohol problems. And after her kidney operation, it was forbidden to drink red wine, and she was drinking.
Perhaps she was leading a destructive life in that she was taking medication and drinking red wine and whiskey. And mixing is never good for the body.
She was doing everything to destroy herself.
To protect her from herself, Laurent Pétain hides her pills. But Romy finds an accomplice in the person of another German actress living in Paris, Marlene Dietrich.
She took her under her wing, not like a mother, but like a doctor looking after someone fragile.
It was Marlene Dietrich's confidant, Louis Bozon, who acted as intermediary between the two women.
I used to take her books, and it seemed to me there were a lot of books. And then one day, I arrived at Marlene's early, and the books weren't completely wrapped up in the parcel, which was open. I would never have opened the parcel myself, and I noticed that the books were hollowed out. They were real books that Marlene cut into to put something inside, something I myself used to fetch from the pharmacy, a product called Catagon, which is now no longer on sale. They were amphetamines. And I finally understood why Romy would open the door for me, because the books contained these things.
Sleeping pills at night, stimulants to start the day. Romy Schneider is locked into an infernal spiral. The day before she dies, Romy spends the day at home in Paris, a day like any other. Her friends notice nothing alarming.
I had a long telephone conversation with her on the Friday evening, and she was fine. We talked about the film project, which was being developed. She said, "I'm happy to tell you that I'm fine. And you?" We were joking around. It was a very long conversation.
A little later, around 8 p.m., photographer Gérard Jacquemesse calls her about a photo shoot planned for the next day.
On a parlé pendant une bonne heure, We talked for a good hour about clothes, and she said, "You'll see, we'll have a mix of colors with some white clothes." And then she says, "You'll see, we'll have some beautiful photos." I told her I'm not worried because I've already taken loads of great photos of you. And then she said something wonderful. "If you know my daughter, that would be marvelous. She's so beautiful. We could have some beautiful photos." And at that moment, when we were talking, she was happy.
On the evening of May 28, 1982, Romy Schneider and her companion return home around midnight after a dinner with friends. Laurent goes to bed. Romy sits down at a small table she uses as a desk. She begins to write a note for a journalist. The next morning, Laurent Pétain discovers her body. She is dead. He immediately calls the police. Laurent Davenat, chief of the Paris Police Department's 8th Criminal Division, is the first on the scene. He begins by asking Laurent Pétain what happened.
He'd gone to bed without Romy Schneider. He woke up in the middle of the night. She wasn't in bed, so he got up and he found her slumped on the sofa. He couldn't wake her up, so he held her in his arms, and the next morning he realized she was dead, that she was no longer alive.
Laurent Davenat calls for a doctor, Dr. Leponge, to examine the body.
We eliminated the hypothesis of violence. The question was it suicide or an accidental death linked to the consumption of alcohol and sleeping pills? That's the hypothesis we favored. So I decided not to request an autopsy. For me, there was no question of sending Cici to the Forensic Institute for an autopsy. I wanted her to live on in the public's imagination, as she always had been.
An autopsy, in any case, would not have revealed if Romy Schneider had deliberately chosen to end her own life.
She didn't talk like someone who was in despair. She was talking about projects, planning a wonderful photo shoot with her daughter, whom she loved, and the man she loved. She was delighted to be doing those photos. She was nothing but happy.
I couldn't believe that she was dead. Laurent said to me, she didn't commit suicide. And I saw the letter she was writing to apologize for not taking part in an interview that had been requested. And at one point, the pen slips all the way across the page. You can feel that it was then that she died.
Officially, the star died of natural causes. Cardiac arrest, a formula that even 25 years later is open to interpretation.
When you take medication and drink more than you should, you can call it suicide, but it wasn't a voluntary suicide.
She wasn't someone who knowingly wanted to destroy herself, who wanted to stop living.
I don't think she felt herself going. I really don't think so.
She had her daughter. She loved her daughter. In my opinion, she would never have killed herself.
All the drama she lived through, the death of her son, that's what killed her. There are people like that. They're out of breath. Out of breath, and they just go.
In the days following Romy Schneider's death, a will was discovered, drawn up in Zurich 19 days before she died, as if she were somehow aware her days were numbered. Everything that I, Romy Schneider, own shall be left to Laurent Pétain and my daughter, Sarah.
After 58 films and after 25 or more years of doing films, nothing was left. No flat, no house, no car, no money, no nothing.
Romy wasn't about money, but the passion for her work.
She was giving life everything, spending everything.
Rosemary Magdalena Albach-Retty, also known as Romy Schneider, was buried in Boissy-sans-Avoir. Her son's coffin has since been transferred to the same grave. Mother and son now rest side by side. The final conclusion to the darkest year in Romy Schneider's all too brief life.